Well, it was kind of the plan to follow him into police work. And when I went in and did the testing and everything, I scored much higher than a police officer normally would. So they said that I qualified to be a firefighter.
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. This podcast exists because I wanted police officers to hear the wisdom and encouragement from the older, experienced officers I was learning from. But that information doesn't always filter down to them, so I have these conversations in order for cops to get life-saving and career-changing support. On this podcast, you'll hear from detectives and dispatchers, U.S. Marshals and county sheriffs, and the occasional patrol officer from my hometown of Kansas City. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are sharing their wisdom and experience so that you don't have to do everything the hard way. One of the earliest suggestions I had from listeners was to talk to a child of a cop. That's still a great idea, but it may take a lot of hard work to sift through all the little kid cuteness to find a few nuggets of real wisdom. But what if you could talk to that kid decades later, after the influence of the police household had a chance to show, good and bad, the impact that it had? What if the child himself went on to become a first responder? That premise drove me to Chris Moore, a Virginia-based firefighter whose father was a police officer. Chris is a great interview because he's got a lifetime of experience wrestling with the ups and downs of the first responder behavioral health world, both firsthand and as a child of a cop. Chris brings a radical level of transparency to this conversation, and I want you to especially notice the 3 unhealthy coping mechanisms that he says he turned to throughout most of his career. Here's Chris Moore. Hello, Chris. How are you today?
Hey, Jared. I'm doing great. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to have you on the show. I'm glad we were able to connect. We've been talking back and forth for a while, and I'm really happy to get to see you face to face.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited to be here, that we have this opportunity, and very honored to be on your podcast here.
Well, thank you. Tell me about growing up. People will see in the intro that you're a firefighter and like, why is he interviewing a firefighter? What's going on? Is the show gone off the rails? and actually, you have a law enforcement connection. So tell me a little bit about that.
I do. So my father was a retired Norfolk, Virginia police officer, and he was also a Vietnam veteran. He was a Marine Corps veteran. And growing up, the son of a police officer, it was hard because he had the Marine background and the structured life and everything like that, and expected the best out of everything, but out of everyone, especially his 2 sons that he had. But growing up the son of a police officer, it was really cool because some of my youngest memories, seeing my dad when he's getting ready to go in for a shift, and just putting that nice, clean, crisp uniform on. Back then, they still had the real thick patent leather duty belts. And just everything. I was just so proud of my dad and seeing the pride that he had when he put that uniform on and was going out to serve the public and serve our community.
In my opinion, I think that the best dressed police officers are former Marines. And not that any Marine's a former Marine, but those who have served as Marines are the best dressed because they care about their uniform at a degree that not very many others, have that intensity of like, I must get this right, and every piece and every crease is going to be perfect and whatever. And so yeah, some of our sharpest dressed police officers here in Kansas City are Marines.
Yeah, and that translates over to the fire service as well.
Oh, really?
You can tell, I think, in just about any uniformed career path or public safety, you can pick out the ones who have a military background, yes. And then you can usually pick out the ones who have that the military background is from the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And there is a difference. They're all sharp, all the Navy, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, whatever. They're all sharp, all great people, but you can definitely tell the Marines.
The Marines are on another level. They care. They have some of the best uniforms, and they wear it with the most precision.
Every day that I had the opportunity to see him when he was on regular day shift, and I got to see that, it was really cool. I was so proud to tell everybody that my father was a police officer, and he came into school when I was going through grade school, and he came in a couple times and did career day, spoke about serving the community and what it meant to him as a police officer. And like I said, I was just always just gushing with pride.
Yeah.
And that's my dad there. That's my old man. And he would take me around on the days where I was out of school when it was summer break. And I would actually go, I guess you really can't do this anymore these days, but he would take me on patrol with him.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I remember we would stop at the firehouses. We'd go to the police precinct. Days that he had court, I'd go to court with him. But I know he stopped a lot of times at the firehouses. And I loved seeing the camaraderie that all of public safety had. But it was just something different when we went to the firehouse and seeing what those guys had and what they were doing and hearing their stories as well.
That's great. It seems like in police culture and also in fire culture, there's this rivalry and they pretend that they can't stand the other side and that kind of thing. But your dad didn't convey that. Your dad was positive toward fire service?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And even though we have that rivalry still to this day, and we always will.
Yeah.
It's a friendly rivalry, and I think some people do get carried away with it at times. But he was really big into, we're all on the same team. We're all serving the same people and doing great things and great work.
Yeah.
And he knows that he might have to have their back at times, and he knows that they're going to have his back.
Yeah.
Or new.
Yeah.
And it was really cool just seeing the relationship that he had developed with everybody in general, but especially with the firefighters, and that they had with him the honor and respect that they shared amongst each other. That really stuck with me to this day.
Yeah. For
the most part, all of his career was uniform. I used to walking the beat. They had a beat that they walked and then actually patrolling and everything. He did some UC work undercover, but he was mostly uniform patrol. Mid-'70s, I think he got picked up with the police department and worked until right around 1990, I believe, when he retired, 1989, 1990.
Now, you did end up going into being a first responder, but you didn't go into law enforcement. You went into fire. Why did you not follow your father into police work?
Well, it was kind of the plan to follow him into police work. And when I went in and did the testing and everything, I scored much higher than a police officer normally would. So they said that I qualified to be a firefighter. No, in all seriousness, I wanted to serve the community, just like my father. I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to be known as Austin Moore's son within the police department. Not that that's a bad thing. I love that everybody knows that I'm his son, but I didn't want to be treated any differently. And plus, right around the time when I first started getting into public safety and showing the interest, there was some pretty violent times going around when all the drug wars in the late 80s and 90s and everything like that. And I'd much rather run into a burning building than have somebody shooting at me and getting in a shootout. My dad had a couple instances like that. But whoever put their faith in me and picked me up first was going to get my dedication, my commitment to service, and my loyalty. And it just so happened to be the fire services who picked me up. When I got hired, I had my application in with several other municipalities. And after I had already got hired and started the fire academy, I had a couple other municipalities reached out to me, and they paid more money and were probably much better suited. They were in my hometown where I live right here in Virginia Beach. But I'm a man of my word. If we don't have our word, then what else do we have? And I told the fire chief when he offered me the job that he would have my loyalty and my commitment. And I stood by that. And I'm still with Chesapeake, Virginia Fire Department, active to this day as a career firefighter. I started in 2000, so 24 years with Chesapeake Fire Department. And before that, in 1993, I was a volunteer firefighter in Virginia Beach for 7 years.
Yeah.
I started out as a firefighter paramedic and got promoted to lieutenant and currently serve as a captain.
During your time as a supervisor, how many times have you had firefighters who had parents who were police officers?
Great question. That actually worked for me. I have one firefighter right now where his dad is a police officer, retired police officer, just recently retired.
Yeah.
But other than that, I've never had anybody that works for me directly.
How many firefighters do you have that are second, third, or more generation firefighters?
We have quite a few. Quite a few that are second generation, and even I believe we have some third generations are starting to come into the fold right now.
That's something that I've been exploring a lot this year in my different interviews, is that law enforcement is becoming more of a family business, which fire service has been that way for a while. And the military is also becoming kind of a family business, where you see these people that are second, third, fourth generation career, not just having served temporarily, but like they're like making 20 plus year careers out of it, and then their kids are doing the same, and so we're seeing an increase in that, and that comes with pros and cons. There's good things and bad things about that.
I have a 19-year-old son, and I've never once have suggested that he goes into public safety. I want him to blaze his own path and find his own way into adulthood. And I've talked to him about finding a career in something where he can support himself with stability and support a family down the road if that's what he chooses to do. But I've never once really pushed or rarely even mentioned going into public safety.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm opposed to it. I'm just trying to let him find his own way and be his own person. If he knows that if he has questions about it and needs some guidance and assistance, that I am right there for him and can point him in the right direction and help him get where he needs to be with that.
Sure.
But I'm proud of him regardless of whatever he does. Mm-hmm. He's a great young man, but I think it's important that we let them spread their wings and fly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm doing. But I would be so proud if he comes to me when we finish this podcast or calls me right now in the middle of it and says, "Dad, I want to be a firefighter," or "Dad, I want to be a cop."
Yeah.
I would love that. I would be tickled to death. But like I said, I'm proud of him regardless.
Not every first responder wants their kids to follow in their footsteps. Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. Excellent question. And I probably would have been one of those first responders not too long ago. We still have such a huge stigma on our mental health and our behavioral health, and we're afraid to reach out and ask for help. A lot of us think that we're going through these things that we see, that we feel all alone, that we're the Lone Ranger, nobody else. We think it's just affecting us as an individual officer or individual firefighter, corrections officers as well, even our dispatchers. But what we don't realize, because we're not talking about it right now, is that it's affecting all of us. Mm-hmm. So with the stigma and everything being taboo, people don't know that there is help out there. And I was one of those persons that didn't know that there was help out there. And prior to that, I wouldn't have wanted my son to go through this, because I didn't know what was going on. And then when I found out what was going on, I didn't necessarily have the tools right away to fix myself. But now that I do, and I'm a big advocate for behavioral health and wellness, then I know that I can prepare my son And not just my son, but everybody else out there whose son or daughter is going into or wants to go into the field as a first responder.
Yeah.
We need to do a much better job. And we're getting there. We still have a long way to go, but we're chipping away at it slowly but surely, starting to get the word out there and get the tools out there to people. But it's not just a matter of getting those tools out, but we got to teach them the know how to use the tools and also the know when to use the tools.
Yes.
And I know if my son were to get into the public safety realm, that he would be in a good place because of the bad place that I was several years ago. Yeah. But I've since gotten help and all the tools that I know, and I'm a huge advocate now for first responders. And like I said, I know that he would be in a good place.
Let's back up and take a running start at your story. So you grew up in a first responder family. What were the pros and cons of that? Are there lessons learned just from your childhood? Are there lessons learned like, you know what, first responder families should really do this or not do that?
Oh man, you're hitting a home run. Another great question. 2 for 2 right now. One of the most important things, and I didn't have this growing up, and I didn't have this in my life. I know you said you want just my childhood, but
that's okay.
I'm learning it or seeing it not happen in my childhood. I didn't know to do this in my adult life as a first responder, but my father never brought work home. He never discussed. He would take us to work,
right?
And we would see the good stuff, the fun stuff is what I would see.
Yeah,
but he would never share with us when he had something bad happen at work. I can see it on my father's face when he came home from work.
But he didn't open up about it.
Yeah, he didn't have a good shift, something horrible he was exposed to or he saw or had to deal with, whatever it may be. You could see. A lot of times, he comes home as the good man that he was and happy-go-lucky and joking and everything. But a lot of times that face would just be kind of washed out. And you could tell that the gears were turning in his head about something that had happened while he was on shift. So one thing that I highly recommend, I think it would have been beneficial, and I know you can't spill the beans on everything that we see with Privacy Act and everything like that, but let your family know that, hey, had a bad shift. I'll throw the ball with you later on. Let Dad just come and decompress for a little while, and then we'll go out and throw the baseball or football or whatever it may be. So I think that was that's probably one of my huge takeaways. And it wasn't just with the kids; it was the whole family dynamic that he wouldn't talk to my mom about things as well. And as us as adults now, we know that is very troubling and trying on a marriage when you just don't have 100% open communication. So all it takes is if he just came home, like I said, and just made us aware that, hey, had a rough time, I'm dealing with it, and for my mom, I'll talk to you about it later or whatever.
Yeah.
And that goes a long ways. I'm learning that now in my adult life because I made a lot of errors because that's what I grew up with, and that's what I understood, that you don't talk about these things or anything. You don't bring work home.
And there's obviously a ditch to fall in on both sides of the road. You can fall into the ditch of being completely walled off. You never share your feelings. You completely shut out the people who love you most. But then you can go on the other end and you can share so much information. You're not just violating HIPAA. You are traumatizing them. And that's going too far that direction. And what often happens is I feel like first responders feel like, well, there's no middle ground, so what do I do? And I think there is middle ground. I think you described it really well, that you would just say, hey, I've had a really bad day. Here's the minimum you need to know so you understand the gravity of it. And I would talk differently to my kids than I do to my wife. And those are different levels of access and different levels of what they can handle. And I'm not going to take it too far, but I'm also not going to just shut them out.
I wish that back then therapy was as prevalent as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have been something very beneficial back in the day, growing up and just having a safe person is what I like to consider therapists. And it doesn't have to be a therapist to be considered a safe person.
Yeah.
Just some kind of confidant for the children or the spouse. And that would have been great, because I had a lot of fears, proud as I was of my father. I mean, we had all the shoot 'em up cop shows back in the day and all the action movies and everything. So I did have a lot of fears that floated around in my head every time. Like I said, as proud as I was, my dad walking out that door with that crisp uniform, I was also scared to death as a young kid, wondering, is my dad going to be coming back?
Yeah.
So having somebody to talk to and confide, and I never shared that with anybody growing up, that I had those fears.
Yeah.
I think that weighed on me quite a bit. It definitely would have been great to be able to confide in somebody. And a lot of times, still to this day, we're very reactive with things. Our whole careers are reactive. The incident has already happened by the time we get the 911 call. So we're already behind the 8 ball.
Right.
So in our everyday lives, we need to start trying to be proactive also, and especially when it comes to getting therapy. And why wait for a problem to happen? Let's go out and seek that therapist. And growing up, I was just referencing the TV shows in the 80s and everything with the shoot 'em up and action. Well, relating therapy to kind of those TV shows as well, I always kind of thought as an adult now that therapy was, I'm walking into an office and there's some pompous dude with like a smoker's jacket on, and he's smoking his pipe, and there's a roaring fireplace, and I'm laying down on a couch. And I'm telling you, that's just not the case. Not at all. It's nothing like that. It's two safe people having a conversation just like you and I right now.
Yep, absolutely. When you look at your 30 plus years as a first responder in fire, where do you see your dad's influence? Where do you see your father's fingerprints, your father's influence on you?
Man, I'm not going to say it, but another home run there. His fingerprints they're all over, good and bad. Initially starting my career out, the negative influence that I had from my father was the whole, I never brought work home. Not until it was 2017. So I went from 1993. I would never, ever talk about it.
Doing exactly the same thing your dad did.
I did everything that he did as far as that goes. And I had a family at the time, my ex-wife now, but my ex-wife and my son, everything I just described, they didn't know what husband was coming home from shift. They described it as walking on eggshells. Sometimes I could come home being in a great, amazing mood, or other times I could come home and be the biggest jerk. So a lot of that was influenced from what I saw and what I was exposed to growing up, how my dad was. I just thought that's how it was supposed to be. Good things from my father, the pride in doing the job and loving the job, loving serving the people and within the community and the neighboring communities and everybody in between, loving all aspects or genres of public safety, because I truly get it, and I realize that we are all on the same team. Every time if we run an accident or something and police are on scene with us, I invite those guys, hey, swing into the firehouse if it's a cold winter day or morning or whatever. Hey, come on, have some coffee, warm up, hang out with us for a little while, or we're having a big dinner. Why don't you guys come over? That's who my dad was. He was a man like that. He loved all the guys that were serving. And he took care of each other, no matter if it was the newest guy in the academy or the most senior person within the department. He treated everybody with respect. I feel that I do the same. I treat everybody with the respect that they deserve. And I have that integrity and that pride that my dad really had. He instilled that in me tremendously.
Are you meticulous with your uniform?
I am nowhere near as much as somebody who has served in the military, but I'm very meticulous. It needs to be right because I'm representing that fire chief who hired me and took my word for my loyalty and commitment. I'm representing him, even though he's gone now, in his department. And it's not his department, it's our department.
Yeah.
But it's all the citizens, and I want to look sharp. A lot of us, we say, and I partially have this mindset that the public doesn't care what we look like as long as we show up. But you know what? We're going to look sharp when we show up, though.
We're going to go ahead and wash the truck anyway.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And not everybody still has that mindset. And even some of my guys that work for me question me about that at times. They're like, "Oh, it's clean. We don't have to wash it this morning when we start shift." I was like, "No, we're going to wash it anyhow. We're going to make sure it's clean. You're not going to have me riding around in a dirty truck.
Right.
We're going to drive around and we're going to do what's best. We're going to look sharp doing it." That goes a long way. Presentation. That's the first thing, the first impression you get with anybody when you see them.
Yeah.
Is what you see.
Yeah.
So we're going to look sharp doing it with our apparatus and with our uniforms.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you spent several years at the beginning of your career, your professional career, walled off from your family to some degree. You said that you were not aware of some of the resources or when to access them. What did that cost you?
Ultimately, it recently, a year ago, it cost me my marriage. There's a lot of issues within the entire first responder community where, like, oh, you haven't made it your whole career unless you've gotten at least one divorce, because we do, or we're told, we get it set in our heads that we have a high divorce rate. Mm-hmm. And I always believed that, but I encourage people out there, look it up. Yeah. Don't just go what you're hearing from me or from you or from other first responders out there. Look it up. I always thought that we had one of the highest divorce rates that there is of any careers. We don't. We're the national average. Yeah. And we're actually, I think, a few points below the national average on divorce.
The high numbers all come with an asterisk.
It cost me my marriage. Nothing bad to say about my ex-wife at all. She was an angel. She stood by my side throughout all of this while we figured everything that was going out. It was 2017 when I was formally diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. And a lot of the times when we don't have healthy coping mechanisms, and healthy is the key word, because we all come up with coping mechanisms, and they're not always the best. And I didn't have healthy coping mechanisms. And I reached out to 3 different things, and I'm not proud of any of these. But alcohol plays a big part in all of public safety, unfortunately. Yeah. And not every person in public safety. When I say all of, I just mean all of our different genres, whether it's law enforcement, corrections, sheriff, firefighting, dispatch, EMS, whatever.
It's accepted and promoted by the culture.
Very much so. And that's something. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here with this or anything. And there's a difference between having a couple drinks here and there, or having it where it's just such a huge part of our culture and everything, as far as if we have a golf tournament or softball game or whatever, there's always, it seems to be, alcohol involved. If we have a union or a FOP meeting or whatever, alcohol afterwards. And that was one of my coping mechanisms was alcohol. The second coping mechanism that I had that really affected my life and my marriage was spending money. And talking to other first responders across the country, that's a whole Me Too thing that these guys are saying. They're like, man, I was doing the exact same thing. It made me feel good. A lot of these things I was doing to build my ego. Mm-hmm. And we need to learn the whole saying that ego is not my amigo. I would take my guys at the firehouse, say, hey, you guys want to go out and go to Top Golf or go out to lunch or do something? And it was with the understanding we were all going to go and everybody pays their own way. But once that bill came, I felt like a big shot. I was building my ego up. I was like, oh, I'll take the bill. And I just put it on a credit card and everything's good until that bill comes.
Yeah.
And I ran so much debt up doing things like that. And then the third thing was relationship. I was unfaithful in my relationship. And that was probably the biggest, obviously the biggest thing right there that really hurt my ex-wife so much and crumbled my relationship, and tried to work through things. But I just put that woman through hell and back. And there was just no way that trust could ever be restored. And we, after almost 20 years of marriage, our relationship was done.
Yeah.
And I'm not proud of it, but if I would have known to talk about things at the start of my career.
Yeah, you told me earlier that you didn't know to open up to your family. You felt you had no one to talk to, which led to the damaging coping mechanisms you had, including the suck it up, buttercup attitude. Just push it all down. Yeah.
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 And that's what I did for those 17 years, the first 17 years of my career, before I just broke down and realized something wasn't right. Too much damage pretty much had been done.
Yeah. What gives you hope now?
God gives me hope. My faith, and my faith is so strong right now in Jesus Christ. And I put all my faith in him, and that's where all my hope comes from.
Are there parts of that are new for you, or are there parts of that go all the way back to childhood?
My faith.
Yeah.
I grew up in the church. When I became a young adult, I had gotten away from the church a little bit. And then when I got married and had our son, we started going to church maybe twice a month. We weren't the twice a year Christians that show up at Easter and Christmas Eve service.
We call those Christmas and Easter only, CEOs.
Yeah. So we weren't like that, but we were going probably at least once or twice a month. And then it was April 17th of 2022. That was Easter Sunday that year. And we were at that service, and just the Holy Spirit came over me. And that's when I officially, for lack of a better words, but accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior that day. And since that day, I mean, everybody always, regardless of where you are in your faith, has ups and downs and good days and bad days. But since that day, life has been so much better and so much easier on me. And that day, like I said, it was April 17th, 2022. That was 1 month and 1 day from a suicide attempt that I had on March 16th of that year. So a month later, and I'm accepting Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And just having that has been great. But I know there's still even issues that people that are strong in their faith still have, and they still need other tools and other resources to still navigate.
Do you feel like we're anywhere close to smashing the stigma around mental health issues?
We're nowhere near smashing it yet. We're slowly chiseling away at it.
Making progress. Yeah.
We are very, very, very slowly, but we are making progress. And that does give me hope that we're getting more platforms for first responder mental health and wellness, like your podcast, and more opportunities to go out to speak to departments. And one thing that I think is huge, I mean, we got to hit our veteran officers and firefighters, but now we're starting to implement these programs where we go to the fire academies and the police academies, and we're hitting our next generation of first responders at the beginning of their career, giving them these tools, resources, and everything that they're going to need. And some agencies that I know of, they are not only talking to these kids that are coming into this profession, but we're bringing in their families as well to get the exact same talk that the new police officer and new firefighter is getting. The family is getting that same talk at the same time, so they know what to look out for. And it's all about walking the walk. And you and I, we can have this talk all day, but if we're not doing the right thing, at the end of the day, it's just talk. It's just a bunch of hot air that's being spewed all over the place. And there is still, unfortunately, there's a lot of that's going on, because like within the fire service over the past 10 years or so, the very hot topic was cancer. And it still is, rightfully so. But now the new hot topic in public safety is mental health and wellness and suicide prevention. And I'm finding we do have a lot of people that are talking the talk, but when it comes time to walk the walk, not everybody is doing it. So, and I'm not saying that you have to have the answers to everything, but you got to have your people's back, your brothers and your sisters in law enforcement or firefighting or whatever genre it may be. Have their back. The best thing we can do for others is to listen. We need to listen to understand that person and let them be heard.
Yeah.
And once we start doing that, just listen without judgment and hearing and understanding what they're saying, what they're feeling, and where they're coming from, then they will start the process of healing.
That's excellent, Chris. I just want to thank you so much for your vulnerability and being willing to come on the show and talk about your background and your experience in fire as a first responder. That just, I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you for the platform of this. And I think that we all need to be vulnerable and open and honest. And that's how people connect to us. And that's how we help others, and by sharing these shared experiences.
Excellent. I so appreciate Chris and his openness and his passion for the well-being of his fellow first responders. He told me that he regularly gives out his phone number to thousands of other people, and he takes calls at all hours of the day and night from these other first responders who are struggling. I truly believe that when we start helping each other storytell our trauma, that we'll see a real impact on our health. At this stage in your career, you may not be a trained clinician, but you can be a trusted helper who listens to the pain in other people's lives. On the next episode of Hey, Chaplain.
Not that the civilian population is good at asking for help, but they're significantly better at asking for help than first responders. The likelihood of a first responder coming to a police chaplain and saying, "Chaplain, policing is too hard for me. The stress of the job, I'm not strong enough. Can you please help me out, Chaplain?" It's highly unlikely.
No.
And so what we've got to do is, when we teach active shooter, we teach you got to keep your head on a swivel. We want every chaplain in America to have a full certifiable understanding of what is leakage, how to spot it, and how to respond to it.
This show is free for everyone because of those faithful supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. If you want to help this show reach cops and chaplains and other first responders around the world, please consider making a $5 donation by following the link in the episode description. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any first responder agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.